Okay, can you hear me? People with the headphones? Good. Okay, well, look, welcome to the first of two panel sessions that I will be chairing around the EU Cyber Resilience Act. The first session we're going to talk about is focus on manufacturers. My name is John Moore. I'm the Managing Director of the IoT Security Foundation. We were delighted to partner the Things Conference. It turns out that the Things Conference community and the IoT Security Foundation were born about the same time. So 2015, Things Conference were born in August, I think, talking to Vinka. We were officially launched on the September the 23rd, 2015. So we've been doing this for just nearly 10 years now. Well, we're past the 10-year point. Some of the things that Windo was talking about earlier about the scarcity of security expertise, that's something that we're looking to do. So we promote good security practice, but we also try to enable it. And part of our mission is really to make security consumable. So what I'm going to do is go along the panel. Excuse me a moment while I do the old person thing here with the glasses. I'm going to introduce the panel. I brought some friends with me from the IoT Security Foundation, and I'm going to go along and invite them to introduce themselves and give you a flavour of what their perspective is. So, Florian, I'm going to start with you. You've just done a keynote, but if you could tell us who you are, where you're from, and the way you view the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome again, everyone. So my name is Florian. I've been with the IoT Security Foundation, I believe, since 4 years. Not from the very beginning, but for at least a considerable time. In my day job, I work as Chief Innovation Officer at SignPath, focusing on software integrity, supply chain security, code signing. And from that perspective, of course, IoT security is of interest, enabling organizations to provide secure software updates, spot any any misalignments in their dependencies, etc. And at IoTSF, I chair the regulatory watch group, where we look out for new and upcoming regulations, dissect existing regulations, and present them to our member companies. I've also contributed with various white papers, one on SBOMs, for example, that we have released. And yeah, always happy to exchange ideas and perspectives within the community.
Okay, I'm Ian Pearson. Let me look at what I do. I work for Microchip, which is a little giveaway with the tag on the shoulder. I'm an applications engineer, so I've worked in the field for 25 years, I guess, looking after clients. At the moment, I wholly focus at the moment on dealing with cyber resilience and cyber within the company and also out with clients, so ensuring people understand what to do to make a product, which is part of what we're here for. And so deep in my history, just as a little backstory, is that I did actually have a very significant hand in designing the first LoRa gateway for Things Network and their first product. So it's kind of a little bit of deep history. I've been around with them since the very first pizza inception, actually, when we got them going. So a long time ago. Richard.
Good morning. I'm going to check. Can everybody hear okay? Okay, so we've got quite a lot of fan noise, so the audio's not coming across to us. Thank you. Good morning, Richard Marshall. I'll give you a very quick potted history. You tell by my grey hair that I might have been around for at least a while. So my background, going back probably nearly 20 years ago, was involved in cellular technology, but in the consumer end of the business, for those who ever remember femtocells, whatever they were, but basically consumer base stations. And obviously we had to do all of the security that you do for a base station, but on a $100 consumer product. And how you actually manage multiple millions of devices, which certainly stressed one or two of the operators. There was the joke, I think our first production batch was more than all of the base stations in the UK, just by way of So familiar with some of the challenges. That actually led me indirectly to being involved, as John was saying, at the start of the IoTSF. And I took the role initially of plenary chair, leading a lot of the activities around that, which one of which we'll come on to in a minute, is the assurance framework. And one of the lead authors is the assurance framework. More recently, very quickly, been an expert contributor to EN 303645, an expert on the Senelec WG8 group for the Radio Equipment Directive, so that's EN 18031 and its 3 parts, and more recently now involved with the horizontal standardisation around CRA.
Okay, so I just want to pick up on that point, Richard, and this session is all about the CRA, but we can't really talk about the CRA without talking about the Radio Equipment Directive. Now, you've been involved in both the formulation of RED and the CRA. So for our audience here, can you give us a kind of a simple summary, concise description of how RED relates to CRA and why it's important right now?
Thanks, John. I love it when John gives me these nice. Can you give me a quick answer on this? I'll do my best. I'll do my best. So I would. My advice to anybody is, even if your product doesn't fall under RED, and even that's, and I'd hope you'd know that by now, because just a reminder, 1st of August was the go live date for the Radio Equipment Directive for Articles 3.3D and F. But my take would be, if you're thinking about CRA, then actually looking at RED right now is probably not a bad place to be. Whether the standards, particularly the horizontal standards, will come out similar to 18031 is up for debate at the moment. That is literally ongoing, but at least the spirit, certainly the activities in standard circles are that at least the spirit of 18031, because it has to, because it's going to be subsumed, or once CRA comes into force, effectively RED becomes deprecated. So if you're worried about CRA, and obviously the standards aren't there yet, 18031, it's not perfect, but it's probably a good place to start.
Thank you, Richard, and I'll commend you on that. That was concise. Thank you. I'd like to move down the panel again here. The question I have for Florian, he can answer yes or no, and he's told me he's going to do that, but I'm going to say he can't give me a yes or no answer, so let me read out the question for you. Does the EU CRA and RED fundamentally change responsibilities of manufacturers compared to previous cybersecurity regulations? And if so, perhaps you could provide a little bit of colour around that for us, Florian?
Thank you very much. So the short answer is yes, it does. It will, especially the Cyber Resilience Act, will tremendously change how software is being developed and manufactured, because it's the first time that manufacturers are held liable for security. So they're forced to maintain a product over a very long time. So that's a first, that they're not just responsible for certain aspects of placing a product on the market, but actually for the maintenance of the entire life cycle.
Pass my friend, same question. Do you have anything to add to what Florian said? When we were in the build-up to the panel here, we talked probably for about an hour or more just on...
Oh, that's my challenge.
Ian, what's your take on that?
Manufacturer responsibility-wise, it changes radically, actually. The key thing, I think, to understand with CRA, everybody's heard of CRA, just to check. Right, is everybody ready for it? Does anybody have a clue what to do when they're going to do CRA? Okay, we'll come up at lunchtime for the workshop and we'll explain that one in a bit more depth. It fundamentally changes a lot of things about how a product comes to market, okay, which is not just technical, it's about business practices and many other factors involved, okay? So there's lots of things about how a product comes in and responsibilities, what you have to do, product lifetime, how things are placed in the market. And equally, another thing to consider is historical product will come into scope, okay? So who has a current radio or other connected product on the market? Nobody. All right, you're okay. Okay, so just to, when you read the regs and you work through them properly, and the way it works is that historical product will come into scope, and it's not written down in CRA, okay? It's written down in the product regulations. The EU is made up of a mishmash of regulations, okay? Different things affecting different ways. So it comes under the blue guide, just to give you another thing to look at. So lots of different things will happen in that respect, just to give you things to look at. Okay, Richard.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, a very quick add to that is it's not quite, RED does actually place obligations. It's just there. The challenge when writing the RED standards was around the fact that it's purely about the product. CRA is about product and processes, which is what makes CRA's scope that much bigger. The thing to remember, though, is there's implied requirements in RED. If you actually read the general provisions, you suddenly realise that actually some things that are being asked for are not product specific, they are about your products in general. And that's the other major thing about CRA is it isn't just about, as Ian noted, it's not just about the product. The reminder now is vulnerability disclosure is the major change. It's now being, or it will be enforced, and just to remind it, it's from next year, not 2027. I'll keep it short.
Yeah, so just a quick plug there. If vulnerability disclosure is something which is new to you guys, and it certainly was new to me. I mean, 10 years ago, my background's in embedded systems and semiconductors. And when people started talking about vulnerability disclosure, I thought, you know, this sounds like it's important. It is important. It's a very important way of keeping the hygiene of your security up to date. So if anybody here wants to know more about vulnerability disclosure, I'm very pleased to say we have a free paper to download from our website, so I would refer you to that. Now, this question, I'm going to start with you, Ian. Again, we're going to go back and start looking a bit more about the technical side of things. Can you perhaps, from your perspective, give us your view on what some of the significant practical challenges are that manufacturers are facing when implementing? We talk about secure by design, we talk about secure by default principles, but specifically under the CRA and RED. Can you perhaps talk a little bit about that, and then I'll do the same thing. We'll go to Richard and then back to you, Florian.
Okay, practical product issues. I'm going to say a thing, and folks might like it. In my view, to caveat this, okay, because the people can disagree. I believe, and I look at it, it's a fundamental change in how you design a product. Okay, so whatever we've done historically, still there, but all the factors we now have to add, all the security aspects of it, the way we have to look at security from the ground up in a product, and design that in all the factors that come around, all the additional features we have to put in a product, it fundamentally changes how embedded products have been designed. Okay, it will still do its task. Okay, but its task now has to be protected within the environment. Okay, one of the primary requirements in there, for instance, will be that the fundamental or the primary aspect of what the product does has to continue in the event of an attack. Right, so if you get a denial of service attack on the comms, it can't stop the product from working. Your product has to do it. So now think about that. How does that affect my product? And I have to have probably an RTOS, probably some way of preventing actions, some way of increasing the thread, decreasing the priority of the comms thread. All that has to be balanced out. Okay, is it thought about today? No, very rarely. We make a product, we make it function, we ship it out the door. We don't deal with it. Okay, there are lots of security aspects that have to be looked at, from how we look at how does that product start. When a product powers up, how do I know it's running what it's supposed to be running? And if I don't have that capability, how can I do a secure update? How can I guarantee the product operates and meets the obligations for compliance? Okay. One of the key points of compliance is my compliance has to continue through the lifetime of the product. So I have to make it compliant on the day it ships, and it has to be compliant all the way through its lifetime. My only means to do that on a shipped product is through a secure update. So I've got to make it very heavily software oriented to be able to deal with that, but have a secure process for it. And then when I've end of life my product, I've still got 5 years of support to do on that product in the market. So all of these are fundamental things I have to think about from how I craft my product and how I put it on the market. Okay? There are lots of other aspects about how my board has to go together, what aspects about security and key management on there, how I'm going to deal with doing back-end stuff for secure updates. How many people think about that today? One. That's not bad. That's 2.5-ish, 3, 4, 3% of the room, 4% of the room, right? That has to be 100% of the room, because that's the legal requirement. Okay. Does it change what we do? Yes. Is it going to be hard? Yes. Is it going to be a pain in the backside for most engineers because they don't want to do it? Absolutely, right? More of the problems that we're going to face are the engineering difficulties. They can all be dealt with, right? Then they're just something that's different. Most of it is a human emotional challenge of I don't want to do it, and it's change, and it's hard, and it's difficult, and maybe I'll go and do something that's not engineering. It's a possibility, okay? That's where most of the challenge will come in. They're just going to be different, and it's going to be harder, and it will affect what we do, right?
Thanks, Ian. I think I'll try and paint a slightly more upbeat picture if I can. So, I guess that's because I've been involved with delivering software securely to millions of devices for quite some time. But the point's well made, which is the biggest thing about CRA is particularly there are likely to be hardware impacts, and we all know what that means. Most hardware products, if you've got to update your product portfolio because it doesn't have the right things in it, obviously from a security point of view, most companies' product life cycles, depending on what sort of product they are typically anywhere from 1 to 3 years. Particularly if you've got an Xitex product that's got to be all fully certified, that can be a 2 to 3 year spin. So one of the first, I think, if you're to take anything away from me when you walk out, as it were, I'll loosely call it the door, is now is the time to start thinking about what you actually need, what you're going to need from a hardware point of view in your product in 2 years' time to meet CRA. The other 2 points that Ian's touched on are, the first point I would also say is don't treat it as a technical problem. This is a big change. Compliance historically has involved 2 parts of an organisation: engineering, development, and whoever's doing compliance. And pretty much everybody else, if there's a safety-related issue, they don't get involved. Suddenly now CRA is going to stretch all of the organisation because it now affects procurement. Do you have the contracts in place to be able to get the support from your radio module supplier or your, whatever components that are coming in with security? The other really crucial thing, John's touched on it already, is vulnerability disclosure. That is one to get out of the way very quickly, because in the worst case scenario, and I've been there, nothing stretches an organisation than suddenly finding that a researcher, hopefully a researcher and not a hacker, a white hat hacker or a researcher comes to you and says, we found a vulnerability in your product. And you've now got to manage that. And I certainly for traditional boards, that really stretches them, because a lot of traditional boards, their initial take will be, what do I need to get an injunction on these guys to shut them up? And of course, that isn't the way to handle it. You need to do, you need to take you can imagine to a board that has that attitude, the idea that Google pays money for researchers to report vulns. So I won't do that in detail. We'll touch on that a little bit later in our session later. But so just to give you a broad brush, there's a lot of things that need to be prepared for now. Hardware being the longest pole in the tent, that's the one to crack on with.
And another challenge that I want to add is that one big change is that you will be responsible for the entire product. So basically any dependencies that you bring in, any third-party software that your product relies upon, you will still be responsible for it. So you have to make sure, you have to do the due diligence that these dependencies, that these components also meet your security requirements and the security requirements of the product. So another big change and challenge there, also reaching into the open source world.
Okay, Richard, I'm going to start with you on this question, and then we'll rotate the microphone this way round, keeping it accumulator shift left as we do this. So in order, we're going to talk about demonstrating compliance with CRA, and you've already mentioned there's a workshop later, so if we'll talk about that, I guess, as we wrap the session up. But in order to demonstrate compliance with the CRA and RED, how much effort will manufacturers have to put into the technical documentation and audit trails? And can you comment, each of you comment perhaps, on the importance of something called software bill of materials, which is something that IoTSF have been talking about for a number of years now, could be because we think they are vitally important, not just software bill of materials, but we're also moving into AI bill of materials as the world moves into AI, and any other technical documentation that's important for meeting the compliance for RED and CRA. So, Richard.
Thank you, John. It's well, you loaded the question with the word technical documentation, and I think that's probably, for those who've not been through it, that's the step change. I'm sure you're all familiar with EMC and safety and all those kind of things, and you go to the lab for a couple of days, and with a bit of luck your product passes, you get a test report, you put it in the technical file, you do the same with the safety report, with a bit of luck you can self-declare. Cybersecurity, unfortunately, that's where it's a really big difference. You can still self-assess. Obviously, if you're in the more critical product class, you'll need a third-party assessment. But in both cases, you'll probably need a level of documentation that not all, but quite a lot of companies are probably not familiar with. And the problem is you don't want to give the documentation work as part of the assessment process to a third party, because boy, the compliance costs are going to get expensive. You know, for it to give a product to a lab to do a full assessment on is going to get, it makes EMC and things like safety look very inexpensive. So one of the first things is and it is already certainly in part one of CRA, the importance of having an architectural description. There is a clear description capture of what's in the product, because without that, you know, you're hard pressed to do a risk assessment, but also you're going to need that to form the basis of the documentation, so you then can go through the requirements and explain how those requirements are going to be met by the architecture and its facilities. So that's really my headline for you is it is about preparation, and unfortunately good old plain old boring documentation, I'm afraid, but it's going to be painful without it. Ian.
Okay, a couple of things, and I'll go quickly looking at the clock. We'll cover more of this in the workshop later, and Rich has talked on it, is the risk assessment side of it. So one of the primary requirements in the documentation for CRA is you have to have a threat and risk assessment. What's one of those? Who's done one before? Very few people from a product security perspective. How do I do one? Well, Embedded hasn't had to do them before, so we're not used to it. It's not really refined in the threat modeling community. So you're going to need to do threat models, okay? And they live, because vulnerabilities change, because the environment in which the product lives is dynamic. So that threat model is dynamic through the whole life cycle of the product. It never dies until the product is decommissioned and no longer available on the market after its 5-year period, right? Start to build up the picture of what's got to be done. We're going to have SBOMs. I'm sure Florian will talk a bit more about these. SBOMs are a vital document in understanding software provenance. Where did I get it from? What's in there? How does it work? When it goes wrong and a vulnerability gets reported, not just directly to you, but indirectly, because you're using a piece of software that's got a bug that's been found somewhere else. I have to know that. And my reporting period for Europe is 24 hours, which means I have to check my software provenance every day. So I need an automated system for that. I ain't going to do it manually, it's too hard. So you need an automated process behind that that's looking for those CVEs being put out. All of these things start to kick in about things we've got to do. But they all start to, once you've built them, become an automated system that you do as part of the product, dynamic nature of the product. Okay, so there's lots of things in the background, and they all form part of your technical file. Okay, and part of it is about when it goes wrong, you do not want to be running around in headless chicken mode trying to find out what software you have. Ask a few of the major companies that have been there. JLR would be an example right now, okay, where the company cannot make things. Okay, so that's why these things matter. All right. Sorry.
Yep. No, thank you. You have talked about SBOM already, so I will bring in another aspect, that much of the technical documentation will also be required to be publicly available to your customers. So it will basically merge with your marketing material, because your customers will also take into consideration, for example, the security assumptions that you make for your products, or the environmental prerequisites that you consider for your product to run in a secure environment. So those will also be taken into consideration when making purchasing decisions. So they will live next to your marketing material, alongside, of course, with specifying the support time frames that you provide, and additional technical documentation that you may need to release to your customers. So also a change in that regard.
Okay, so we're virtually out of time. A wise man once said, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. So if you haven't started the journey, then I recommend that you come and look up IoT Security Foundation. There's a lot of expertise here. If I was a football manager, I would be looking at my bench here and say we've got a real deep bench of expertise. So with that, if you can join me in thanking our panel. Actually, just before I go, there's a workshop. Do you want to call out the workshop for later that you guys are running? Just call it out. We're out of time. So.
They're all headphones on. What time are you on? It's 12 o'clock in one of the workshop rooms. Don't ask me which one because I can't remember. Obviously upstairs at the back. Yeah. But we're going to try and cover the what's in CRA, what do I have to do, and how the Security Foundation, so the assurance framework that we have, helps you achieve that. Okay. To actually get to that technical capability, and it also then covers things like risk and threats and all those kind of things. So we'll talk about that.
So if you could join me in the time-honored way of thanking our panel. Thank you.